everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I wanted to give you some information on ways to define your team's first velocity. So, when you get into a new project and you have to kickstart your sprints or iterations, you always need to plan for how many stories you need to pull into a particular sprint or iteration. At that time, you need to know what is the team velocity. Based on that, you would be able to pull up a specific amount of stories into your iteration. So if at all you want to know how to do it, then this is the video for you. So let's get into it. So basically there are three ways in which you can kind of arrive to a team's velocity. One is checking for team's past data. The second one is run one sample iteration, and the third one could be roughly estimate. So you can do any one of these three in order to define your team's very first velocity. Okay, so let's go in detail and see what are these three. The first one is check for the team's past data. So one thing that you need to keep in mind is that every team's velocity is different. Okay, not if you cannot compare another team's velocity along with your team. So, with this in mind, you need to check if there is any past projects that the team has worked on to get the velocity. So, one is you need to check if this team has kind of worked on any past project together, and check if you can get that historic data in order to define your team velocity. So you would have had a lot of velocity details as to how many stories a team had been completing. You would can come up with that. But if you go to see, chances are very less where the exact team would have transited to another project. Okay, most of the time team members get allocated to other projects, they roll off and stuff like that. So chances are very less. So if at all data exists, then you can use that velocity. So sometimes even if there's a similar project, okay, with the same tech stack, with the same architecture, same ideas, stuff like that, maybe that could be another possible historic data that you can use to define your team's initial velocity. But this is the context of checking for past data in order to define your team's velocity. The second one is to run one sample iteration. So this is the best thing that you can do. If you don't have historic data, take up one iteration and see how many stories the team can actually complete. So with this, you can define the next iteration as the with the correct velocity. Okay, so this sample iteration is just like a testing thing that you have to do in order to check what could be the velocity of your team. And the third one is roughly estimate. So when you don't have time to even run a sample iteration, you don't have historic data, then you're only left to estimate and to give a rough estimation. So at that time, you need to do it logically and practically. Okay, you just cannot come up with a number. So when you do this rough estimation, you need to keep in mind, when taking a wild guess, take into consideration the noise and a buffer time. Okay, so you might ask me, what is this noise? So it's nothing but the interruptions developers face when developing. So it can be, what can be these interruptions? It can be meetings, calls, emails, sudden ad hoc tasks coming in, planned unplanned leaves, outages, stuff like that. So all this leads to noise, and these are going to interrupt developers in sitting down and actually starting the development. So keeping this in mind, now let's say that you have defined one story point as one ideal day. So I've taken a couple of videos on how you can, look at story points. So again, every team story point definition is not the same. My team story point, one story point might mean one idle day, and another team story point might mean how complex or how much of effort needs to be put in to complete that particular story. So it varies. But let's say for your team, in this example, there is one story point which means one idle day. Okay, so what's an idle day? A day with no interruptions. So note this point, it's a day with no interruptions. Okay, so let's take the negation of this. So two actual days might equal one idle day. Okay, which means that 2 days if I sit and work with all these meetings, calls, messaging that I have to do, 2 days if I sit, I would be able to only complete one day of work, which means that 2 days equal one idle day. Okay, so all those meetings, calls, planned leaves, stuff like that would equal a day's work. Okay, so I hope you're getting this point. It's kind of complex at the first go, but if you kind of understand that, it's easy. So with this in mind, now you need to check and see what could be the velocity that you can go with. So first what you do is you check the number of members in your team and check how many days you're going to run that iteration. So usually iterations are around 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or maximum 4 weeks. Okay, the longer it takes, no good. So let's say in this example we have 5 developers and we have a 2 weeks iteration, which means 10 days. So Saturday and Sunday for 2 weeks, 4 gets covered there. So you have only 10 days. So now how do you calculate the developers days? So how many developer days do you have in hand? So that equals the number of developers into the number of working days. So in this example, you have 5 into 10, which gives you 50. So you have 50 developer days. Now, not all those 50 developer days is going to be productive, because I said there is going to be noise in there. So which means you cannot give story points which equals 50 developer days. You need to consider all that noise, all those interruptions that come into those 50 developer days, and accordingly you need to estimate the story points. So if you see, already in my example, 2 developer days equals only 1. So it means that almost half of my days are going to go with noise, for example. Okay, so I can estimate like around 15 to 20 story points that can be taken. So now keep in mind and note this point, it's just an estimation. Okay, I'm not over committing and I'm not under committing things. Okay, I'm just estimating. If at all your team has a very faster velocity, your team might complete more than 20 points. But for the safe side, I'm approximating it to 15 or 20. But that's totally left up to you as to the confidence level and what story point you want to go. But this is the way you can kind of estimate like what would be your team's initial velocity. As you get the team working with multiple iterations, you would kind of average out the velocity and you would have a fixed velocity. I've taken a couple of videos on what these velocities are, how do you build velocity charts and stuff like that. So I'll add it in the description box. You can check out those links and you can view those videos. But for now, that's it for this video. So if you like this, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.